So, one challenge we have as academic writers is sorting through all of the information that we find to make sure that we're using credible sources. I typed in here a Google search about women in the civil rights movement, and I had these are the results that popped right up. When I look through these sites, I am finding some different kinds of sources, and sometimes we don't even know what the source is. So, for example, I see this one, 8 historic women who pioneered the civil rights movement. And I'm going to click on this link. And it says it's from Mashable. Now, I'm always interested in Mashable because it's little chunks of information that are pretty easy to read. But I'm not actually sure what Mashable is itself. So, one of the tricks that I use is I go to Google and I type in the question, what is, and then I put it in quotes, the term in quotes, so that Google searches for the exact term. What is Mashable? And I can see right here that it's a digital media website. That's some information that I have. So it's a digital media website. If I click on Wikipedia, I can get a little bit more information about it. Let's see. Mashable was founded in Scotland. Early iterations were a simple WordPress blog. Let's see. Mashable Awards. I'm still not seeing tons of information about it. I know it got a couple of web awards. So I'm going to have to go on and see if I look at the article, what else I can tell from its source. Remember that when you're looking for an article to use in academic writing, there are 3 criteria that you really need to make sure that you have. First, it needs to be unbiased. So you have to watch out that the sponsoring organization isn't doesn't stand to profit or doesn't have an underlying mission or attitude or belief that's affecting the piece. So it needs to be neutral and objective. Second, you need to make sure that your source is authoritative, that they actually have the knowledge in order to talk about your topic. Anyone can talk about black women in the civil rights movement, but I would be looking for an academic paper for someone who's done some research, done their homework, or is an expert in the field. And third, the source needs to be current. It needs to be up to date. I can't be talking about a topic. I can't in an academic paper. I don't want to use an out of date article where there might be new information. And this issue of currency varies with different sources. If I'm writing about history, then going all the way back to the time of the civil rights movement is going to be fine. But if I'm writing about treatments for depression, then I really don't want any sources that are more than 5 years old because they could be outdated. So I'm going to go back to the source here and I'm going to look and see what I find out. And let's see, what I see is this discussion that this person is writing about. And it talks about how there were no women at all in the movie Selma. And it talks about how these people, how she incorporated people into the site. Now, excuse me, into her script. Now, one of the things that happens here for me is when I look at this, I think this is interesting, and I might use this for some background information, but this is not necessarily the kind of a source. I don't know who Johanna Desta is, and I'm not even sure where this information really came from. So even though it looks really interesting and it might work to give me some background information, and it's actually a good source for writing about the film itself, but looking for women in the civil rights movement, I probably want to go back and see if any of those other sources were something that I could count on, a little bit more credible. I see this article, "The Unsung Heroes of the Civil Rights Women, of Civil Rights Movement are Black Women You've Never Heard of." This is from USA Today. So I've heard of USA Today. And what I'm going to do now is take a look at our media bias chart. And this is a tool that we can use to find out if sources are neutral or if they shift towards more any kind of a particular kind of partisanship, and also what their information is based on. So you can see if you look at this chart, neutral is in the center. That means it's pretty balanced, minimal or biased balance. And then skews right means that the publication tends to be on the more conservative side. Skews left would be more on the liberal side. So we want, whenever possible, to use something that's neutral. Also, if you look here on the along this along on the edge here, you'll see that it it also rates what kind of information is included. So you can see that original fact reporting, this is something that we really look for, right? Is any kind of source that's doing its own reporting and is neutral. And then fact reporting, again, right in here in the middle, means they're reporting facts. It's not about opinion, it's about information, and it's neutral. So if I click here, I can see that USA Today actually is dead center. So that's a good thing. That helps me understand that this is likely to be a neutral source. So when I look here, I see that this is a source that's written, it's in a newspaper that does neutral fact reporting. So I can expect that this author has done some research. This article is only from a year ago, and it is about the civil rights movement, so that means it's up to date enough to contain some information that would be useful to me. So I'm going to go ahead and say this would be a credible article that I could use in an academic paper. I'll go back to my search again, and I can see that there is some other. Here's a publication, The Invisible Women of the Civil Rights Movement, from something that's a source that's called Why, WHYY. And so when I first look at this, I think, well, what is WHYY? So once again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to Google. I'm going to go back to Google and try to figure that out. And I'm going to put what is WHYY. And notice that there is a little clue here because it begins with a W, and you know probably as well as I do that initials beginning with W are often radio stations. So here I am, and I see that it's from HYY FM, and I can see that HYY is a public FM radio station. So that means it's public broadcasting, PBS, or in this case, it's national. It's affiliated with National Public Radio, and usually these broadcasters are also considered to be neutral radio stations. And we can look it up on Wikipedia again and see that it's a public broadcasting service member television station serving Pennsylvania and the United States. So it's actually it's a virtual and it's a digital channel, and it's part of the public broadcasting service. So I would say that PBS is usually known as a fairly neutral site. A little left, I can see here's NPR, so that's National Public Radio, and that skews a little bit to the left, but it's still solidly in that neutral column. And considering that I'm not writing about really a political source, I'm writing about I'm not writing about a political topic, I'm writing about something historical, then I feel like I would be okay to go ahead with this article. But I'm still going to be held responsible to look for any kind of language or anything in the article that would suggest a bias. So this article would work for me as well. So hopefully I've gone over the steps to determining what an article is or what a source is. And you'll remember that what I did to start was I had a Google search of sources. I asked a question about women in the civil rights movement, and I got a list of possible articles or information on the web. I clicked on these articles, and then when I found out what they actually were, I did my homework by actually typing in or Googling and asking about the source. And I double checked my media bias chart to make sure that it fell in that neutral zone and that it was usually based on factual reporting. And that way I felt pretty confident. I also looked at the date of the article. This one was written in January 20th, 2015, which would be an acceptable time because I am talking about history. So that's the strategies that you can use to figure out what source you're using and whether or not it's a credible source for an academic paper. I hope that's helpful.